Chapter 1. Into the Unknown. In the heart of the 1993 winter, the bustling city of Anchorage, Alaska, pulsed with a peculiar anticipation. Among the chatter of tourists and rugged locals, a team of 5 prepared for a journey that promised both peril and discovery. At the helm stood Dr. James Callahan, a stoic figure whose years of navigating the most unforgiving terrains had earned him respect and admiration. Alongside him were Claire Holt, a botanist with a fascination for Arctic flora; Marcus Doyle, a brilliant geologist with an eye for ancient formations; Ethan Black, a survivalist known for his relentless grit; and Lily Carter, a young but daring photographer, eager to capture the wild through her lens. The mission was clear: chart the last unrecorded valleys near the Kuskokwim Mountains and return with data that could redefine Alaskan geography. Spirits were high as they boarded their sturdy seaplane, fueled by dreams of exploration and armed with months of meticulous preparation. Yet, as the plane soared into the gray expanse, few could anticipate the unforgiving trials awaiting them beyond the horizon. 3 days into their expedition, navigating a maze of dense forests and glacial rivers, the weather turned violent. A tempest, more ferocious than any prediction, swallowed their plane whole. The pilots fought valiantly, but nature's fury was overwhelming. With a bone-jarring crash, they landed on the frozen banks of the Keetuk River, their once grand adventure instantly turning into a desperate fight for survival. Chapter 2. Shattered Plans. When James Callahan came to, the first sensation was biting cold seeping into his bones. His body ached from the impact, head spinning as he tried to sit up. Around him, the wreckage of their plane lay scattered like broken wings across a snow-blanketed forest clearing. "James, are you okay?" Claire's voice cut through the howling wind. She scrambled over to him, her gloved hands tugging at his coat. Callahan's vision steadied. Claire's face was pale, a fresh gash on her forehead bleeding under a hastily applied bandage. "I'm fine," he grunted, wincing as pain flared in his ribs. "The others?" "Alive," Claire said grimly, "but shaken. Ethan's already gathered everyone by what's left of the fuselage. The pilots didn't make it." A heavy silence fell over them, momentarily muting the wind's shrill cry. Callahan swallowed hard and forced himself to stand. Broken bodies could wait. The living needed leadership now. The team regrouped near the smoldering remnants of the plane. Ethan, his weather-beaten face grim, was distributing salvaged supplies. Marcus clutched a fractured compass, and Lily, though visibly shaken, kept her camera close, documenting their wreckage with shaky fingers. "No radio, no emergency beacon," Ethan reported. "It was crushed in the crash." "Any sign of the emergency food rations?" Callahan asked, surveying the scattered debris. "A few packs," Marcus replied, "but half were destroyed or lost. We have some water filters, 1 med kit, and minimal camping gear. No shelter other than what we can scavenge." Callahan exhaled, his breath a cloud in the frigid air. "Then we make shelter here for now, conserve energy, salvage everything useful, and wait. Rescue teams will search once they realize we're overdue. We just have to survive the next few days." It was a fragile hope, but in the wilderness, fragile hope was often the strongest lifeline. They worked until exhaustion forced them to stop. Using fragments of the plane's hull, they constructed a crude windbreak and set up a central fire. Claire checked and dressed wounds, while Marcus inventoried what little they had. Ethan scouted the immediate surroundings, returning with grim news. No clear trails, no visible landmarks, just endless trees and ice. That night, huddled around their small fire, the weight of their situation sank in. Snowflakes fell thick and heavy, the wind howling through the skeletal branches like ghosts mourning their misfortune.
"We're 70 miles from the nearest known settlement," Callahan muttered,
reading the coordinates from a partially intact flight log. Even if they're searching, the storm could delay them for days, weeks even. "How long can we last on these rations?" Claire asked. 10 days, Marcus answered quietly. "Maybe less." Silence settled again, only broken by the crackle of the fire. Faces reflected flames and fear, each of them lost in thought. Lily hugged her camera like a lifeline, her voice a whisper. "Then we need to be ready to move. Sitting here waiting could kill us." Callahan agreed. He knew that every survival manual would advise against moving without a known destination. But this was Alaska's brutal wilderness. Remaining in one place might be even deadlier. "Tomorrow," he said firmly, "we salvage everything useful, get a clearer sense of our surroundings, and decide on a direction. We adapt. We survive. We will not die here." It was not a grand speech, but it was enough. Hope, small and fragile, flickered again in their hearts as the snow continued to fall, burying their shattered plans beneath a white, unforgiving blanket. Chapter 3. Into the Frozen Wild. Morning came with an eerie quiet. The snowfall had ceased, leaving behind a pristine, deceivingly beautiful blanket of white. Beneath the soft surface, dangers lurked. Thin ice, hidden crevasses, and predators that prowled the silence. Callahan stirred the embers of their dying fire, willing life back into the warmth. One by one, the others emerged from their makeshift shelters, faces hollow but spirits not yet broken. They gathered to discuss their course. Ethan stood before a rough sketch he had drawn in the snow with a broken stick. "Following the Keetuck River downstream," he began, "is our best chance. Rivers lead to people, or at the very least to familiar terrain. If we go north, we risk deeper wilderness and potentially getting lost." Claire nodded in agreement, tracing her finger along the imaginary river. "Downstream increases our chances of finding a trapper's cabin or fishing settlement. Plus, we can source water more easily." Marcus, ever cautious, added, "We'll need sleds. The snow's too deep for sustained hiking. We can fashion sleds from the plane's wreckage and use ropes from the cargo hold." Lily, listening intently, finally spoke. "If we're moving, I want to document everything, not just for records, but so others can understand what we endured." Her determination shone through despite her frail appearance. By midday, they had repurposed aluminum panels into crude sleds, tied with fraying ropes and secured with salvaged brackets. They packed their remaining supplies, food rations, medical kit, and survival tools, leaving behind anything non-essential. Claire insisted on carrying small pouches of seeds and plant samples, her devotion to science unwavering even in hardship. The first steps away from the crash site felt heavy. Behind them, the blackened skeleton of their seaplane stood as a grim monument to what was lost. Ahead, the wild awaited, vast, merciless, and indifferent. Days blended into each other. Each morning began with the sound of winds scraping against the cliffs, each night with a battle to ignite fire with dwindling resources. They faced biting wind that cut through layers of clothing and dense woods where every step felt like a fight against nature itself. Food became a constant preoccupation. Ethan displayed his expertise, setting up snares for hares and fishing through ice holes. Claire identified edible plants buried beneath snowdrifts. But hunger was never far behind, its grip tightening with each passing day. One evening, after narrowly escaping a collapsing ice shelf near a frozen creek, tensions frayed. Marcus exploded in frustration, throwing a broken compass into the snow. "We're gambling with our lives. What if the river leads nowhere? What if we're just marching toward death?" Callahan's voice was calm but firm. "If we stay, we die. If we move, we have a chance. We've all made sacrifices, but we can't let despair dictate our actions." Lily captured that moment on film, Callahan standing tall, surrounded by ice and uncertainty, a beacon of leadership in the storm. It would later become one of the most iconic images of their journey. On the 12th day since leaving the wreck, they encountered their first sign of human presence: the skeletal remains of an old hunting cabin, its roof collapsed, its contents pilfered by time and animals. Still, they salvaged a few precious supplies: a half-full tin of preserved meat, a rusty axe, and fragments of candles. More importantly, nearby were faint markings carved into a tree, an old hunter's directional symbols pointing westward. Hope, fragile but alive, surged through them. "West," Ethan murmured. "It's risky, but if it leads us to a settlement or a safer passage, it's worth the gamble." "Then west we go," Callahan agreed. Their journey through the Alaskan wilds was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, the direction felt real, the goal attainable. Little did they know, the land they were about to traverse held secrets older than any map and challenges fiercer than any storm they had faced before. Chapter 4. Trials of Ice and Fire. The wind howled louder as they moved westward, their crude sleds creaking under the strain of dwindling supplies. The Alaskan wilderness stretched endlessly around them, a frozen expanse of jagged ridges and silent forests. The snow here seemed thicker, the air colder, and the silence heavier. Each day they pressed forward through deep snowdrifts and over frozen streams, their bodies weakened but their resolve strengthening with every mile. Marcus led with a steady gait, charting their course based on rock formations and old geological instincts. Ethan hunted along the peripheries, bringing back rabbits and fish when luck favored them. Claire busied herself with collecting any plant life that peeked from under the snow, noting unusual patterns in the landscape. Lily continued to photograph their journey, her lens documenting the unfiltered rawness of survival. By the 4th day heading west, they approached a vast gorge, its icy cliffs towering like white giants, the frozen river below snaking its way through the earth. Crossing it would be treacherous, but skirting it would cost them precious days. "We risk losing more than time if we go around," Callahan said, his voice hoarse. "If we cross, we can make it in one day." "Or die in the attempt," Marcus muttered, eyeing the brittle ice bridges spanning the gorge. Ultimately, survival demanded risk. Tying themselves together with rope, they tested each step, distributing weight evenly over the ice. Creaks echoed beneath their boots, but the ice, though moaning, held. Halfway across, disaster struck. A loud crack split the silence, and Lily, at the tail end of their line, gasped as the ice crumbled beneath her feet. Reflexes honed from years in the wild kicked in. Callahan and Ethan braced, holding the rope taut as Lily dangled above the abyss. "Hold on, Lily!" Callahan bellowed, adrenaline surging. Claire and Marcus scrambled back, helping pull her to safety. Minutes felt like lifetimes, but finally, with a heave and desperate grips, Lily lay sprawled on the ice, her chest heaving, tears freezing on her cheeks. They pressed on, every step more cautious than the last. By nightfall, they had crossed the gorge, collapsing around a small fire on the other side, their spirits shaken, but alive. On the 7th day of their westward trek, they stumbled upon the first hints of something extraordinary. The air grew strangely warmer, the snow thinner. By afternoon they reached a valley where steam curled from cracks in the earth, and patches of green peeked through the snow. "Geothermal activity," Marcus whispered, marveling. "This valley, it's like a microclimate." Sheltered by towering cliffs, the valley thrived in stark contrast to the frozen world beyond. Streams trickled down moss-covered rocks, wildflowers bloomed defiantly, and the scent of life replaced the usual sterile cold. A natural paradise hidden amidst Alaska's brutality. Ethan led them to a warm spring where they replenished their water. Claire identified plants she had only read about in research papers, some thought extinct in the region. Lily photographed everything, capturing the surreal beauty of life carved into nature's harshest realms. For the first time since their crash, they rested properly. Warmth returned to their bones, hunger eased with newfound foraging opportunities, and their bodies began the slow process of healing. Callahan sat by the fire one evening, a rare smile softening his hardened features. "We survived the worst. We can make it out of here." But Ethan, ever the realist, cautioned, "We can't stay here forever. Supplies will run out, and winter will return stronger. We need to keep moving." Nods of agreement circled the fire. They marked the valley on Marcus's salvaged map, naming it Eden Hollow. It would be their sanctuary, their pivotal point of survival. But their journey was not yet complete. Rested and reinvigorated, they prepared to leave Eden Hollow, knowing it would always remain etched in their memories. With repaired sleds and replenished spirits, they ventured onward, determined to find their way back to civilization, and to one day return with the world to this hidden marvel. Ahead of them lay more trials, more unknowns, but the valley had rekindled their hope, and in the wild, hope was as vital as fire. Chapter 5. The Road Home. Eden Hollow became a memory behind them, a whisper of warmth in the chilling wind. With their bodies strengthened and spirits lifted, the group pressed on. The days grew marginally easier, though the challenges remained relentless. They followed the valley's stream, its waters meandering westward, a liquid guide towards hope. After 3 days of steady travel, they encountered signs that life had once touched these remote lands. Splintered wooden beams jutted from snowbanks, and collapsed structures poked through white drifts. An abandoned trapper's cabin stood nestled at the edge of a clearing. Time and weather had ravaged it, but within its rickety walls, they found relics of humanity. Rusted tools, cracked ceramic mugs, and most importantly, a working flintlock rifle with a handful of cartridges sealed in wax. "Someone lived here once," Claire whispered, reverently brushing frost off a moldy journal. "This is proof we're not alone in this wilderness." "And if someone lived here," Ethan said, loading the rifle, "then someone traded here. We follow these signs, and they might lead us out." A sense of direction renewed their determination. Marcus meticulously mapped every landmark, his fingers ink-stained from salvaged charcoal. Claire pressed leaves and plant samples into the few dry pages of the trapper's journal, while Lily's camera recorded their steady march towards civilization. But the wilderness did not let them go so easily. Storms swept through the valleys with little warning, turning the ground to slush and the wind to a biting gale. On their 20th day since leaving Eden Hollow, they faced their greatest challenge. A vast frozen lake that stretched further than the eye could see, shimmering deceptively under a pale sun. Callahan surveyed the expanse warily. "This is where many men make their final mistake," he muttered. "The ice may not be as thick as it looks, yet to go around would mean weeks of detouring through difficult terrain." Weighing their options, they made a collective decision. Cross, but with utmost caution. Spreading out their weight, they moved slowly. Cracks sang beneath their feet like nature's eerie orchestra. Midway across, a distant rumble signaled approaching danger. A blizzard rolled over the mountains, swallowing the world in white. Visibility dropped to mere feet. They huddled together, the howling wind drowning their shouts. The lake's surface shifted ominously beneath them. Marcus, leading at the front, suddenly yelled, "Move! The ice is breaking!" Panic surged. Muscles screamed in protest as they sprinted, sleds clattering behind. Sheets of ice groaned and split, frigid water bursting through jagged seams. Claire slipped, her foot plunging into the icy depths, but Ethan yanked her up without hesitation. For what felt like eternity, they ran blind, driven by primal fear. When the storm finally subsided, they collapsed at the far shore, gasping, shaking, but alive. 2 days later, hope finally materialized in the form of human footprints. Fresh ones, too, deep impressions in the snow, leading along a worn animal trail. They followed eagerly, and by dusk, smoke curled against the horizon. A small outpost appeared, a hunting cabin with a satellite dish perched on the roof, incongruously modern against the rustic timber. As they approached, a weathered man stepped out, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes widening at the sight of the ragged, frost-bitten strangers. "Sweet Mary, you folks alive out here?" the man gasped, disbelief etching his lined face. Callahan managed a weak smile. "We could use some help." Within hours, they sat by a roaring fire, wrapped in heavy furs, sipping hot broth. The man, introducing himself as Joe Ketterman, radioed for rescue. The authorities, he informed them, had given up hope weeks ago, the harsh weather having grounded all search efforts. When the helicopter arrived 3 days later, each step towards it felt like crossing into a dream. As the rotors beat the frozen air, the team cast one final look at the wild land that had tested them beyond imagination. "We'll come back," Claire whispered. "We have to." Their return was a whirlwind. News cameras flashed, interviews aired globally, and their survival became a symbol of human endurance. Callahan, stoic as ever, spoke humbly of teamwork and resilience. Ethan published a survival guide. Claire's discoveries revitalized botanical research. Marcus's maps opened doors to unexplored regions, and Lily's photographs, raw, haunting, and beautiful, told a story the world would never forget. Yet amidst the fame, they remembered the silence of the wild, the unforgiving beauty, and the hidden sanctuary of Eden Hollow. At conferences and public talks, Callahan often concluded with the same words. "In Alaska, we found something more than survival. We discovered the enduring strength of humanity against the indifference of nature." And in the hearts of the 5 survivors, the wilderness always whispered, a quiet promise to return, to honor the land that nearly claimed them, but ultimately revealed their truest selves. Epilogue: The Echo of Wilderness. Years passed, but the memory of the Alaskan wild remained as vivid as the day they had emerged from it. The 5 survivors carried scars, both visible and hidden, yet each of them found new purpose in the wake of their extraordinary journey. Dr. James Callahan retired from leading expeditions, but dedicated his life to mentoring young explorers. His lectures became legendary, his words imbued with hard-earned wisdom. His final published book, Against the Silence, became a bestseller, not for its harrowing tales of survival alone, but for its celebration of resilience and human spirit. Claire Holt returned to academia, founding a botanical research center dedicated to studying Arctic flora. Eden Hollow, once a refuge, became the centerpiece of her studies. After years of preparation, she led the first sanctioned return expedition, documenting unique species that had adapted to the harshest climates known to man. Marcus Doyle's maps were adopted by geographical institutions worldwide. The once unknown valleys of the Kuskokwim region became part of official records, and he often smiled when explorers retraced their footsteps, seeking the wonder and challenge he once faced. Ethan Black became a revered voice in survivalist circles. His guidebooks, laced with stories of Alaska, saved countless lives. Yet in interviews, he always spoke humbly of the importance of teamwork and trust. Lily Carter's photographs traveled the world in exhibitions titled The Wild Within. Her most famous photograph, a group of survivors, faces worn but eyes alive, standing beneath towering pines, won prestigious awards, but for her, the greatest achievement was telling the true story of humanity's bond with nature. They returned to Eden Hollow, together and sometimes alone, paying homage to the land that tested them. They stood by the warm springs, beneath the endless sky, remembering the silence, the fear, the wonder, and the strength they had unearthed within themselves. And deep within the Alaskan wild, the wind still whispered their tale, of survival, of courage, of unity. The land remained unchanged, eternal in its majesty, but it held the echoes of those who dared to walk its frozen heart and came back to tell the world what it means to be truly alive.